Hey there, how's it going? Welcome to section 6 of your ceramic demos, which is all about surface technique number 3, texture. So in your prior demo, we talked about surface techniques 1 and 2, which was subtractive clay techniques as well as additive clay techniques. So at this point, you guys know how to carve away clay, and you also know how to attach clay together. Now we're going to talk about texture. So what is texture? We've seen it a lot in flat art, two-dimensional art. It's when you get an impression that something has texture. But when we deal with texture in three-dimensional art, especially ceramics, we are dealing with something that you can actually feel. So what is texture? It's essentially where you have a surface that has slight different variations in height. The overall effect is that when you run your hand over it, the surface doesn't feel smooth. It feels a little rougher, so to say. So that's different than smooth, right? A lot of people will say, hey, Ms. Singleton, is smooth a texture? Like, my project is smooth, does that count as a texture? The simple answer is no. Smooth is not a texture. Smooth is actually the opposite. Something that is smooth has lack of texture or does not have texture. That's not to say that smooth areas of your project serve no purpose. It can actually look really nice if you have some areas that are highly textured in your project, and in that same project you have some areas that are very smooth. The smooth areas can actually really complement the textured areas really well. So by using both, it can help lead to a very successful project. Next, what we're going to do is we are going to talk about some specific ways that you can put texture into your projects. All right, so one way that you can create texture in your project is by pressing in just kind of random objects into your clay. You will notice that it'll take on the opposite of whatever design you're pushing in. In other words, if you look at this shell, right, there's all these ridges that stick out, these slow gradual areas where it gets wider and then comes in. So that's going to do the opposite when you push it into your clay. Instead of being like here, it's mounds that stick up. Once you push this into your clay is going to have U-shaped divots that go in. So, for example, if I were to want to push this into clay, and again, there's probably a bunch of different ways you could do it. Just slightly push it in. And once you do it over and over, you're going to create a little bit of a texture. You can do it for, as many times as you want to create a unique texture. You could even do it a different way where you kind of maybe roll it, and that could create a slightly different kind of look. Here's a different shell that might even give you a bit of a slightly different texture, probably more rough. So I just slightly roll it into the clay, and look, now you have another unique texture. So now if you're using shells, for example, to create a texture, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are trying to create shells in clay. It just means maybe you get this like brain blast where you're like, oh, this could be a great texture for, I don't know, like elephant skin or, whatever. This could be a great texture for rope. Let your creativity blossom. What's really cool about taking random objects to press them into things too is you can use them for things besides slabs of clay. So today I'm going to be showing you all examples on slabs of clay of how texture can work. But when you use random objects like this, it could be on three-dimensional pieces. Why is that so unique? Later I'm going to show you guys some slab mats for texture. And they're really awesome tools to have, but you can only use them on slabs. But these objects here you can use on anything, three-dimensional objects as well. All right, so that's some shells for an example. Now I'm going to show you guys a texture that I am able to get by using actually a ceramic project that I had made a while ago. So you'll notice that some areas of this are all kind of raised up. And let's see what it does when I press this into our clay. So I'm going to just kind of roll it over the clay. And if I did a more consistent press over the entire piece of clay, you would have a pretty neat texture. You know, it's very delicate, dainty, some scroll work. But so, you know, I literally took a prior project and used it as a texture, which you guys could totally do too. Then there's also some other random things you could use, one of which, Expo marker, right? And I'm not saying you guys would have to use an Expo marker, but think about random pens and things around the house that have an interesting tip or an end that can create maybe some sort of unique texture. So I'm going to take the back side of this Expo marker and I'm going to press it repeatedly into various areas on the clay, and let's see what it does. So it creates a unique texture. Honestly, this might almost be more of a pattern, but the unique thing is if a pattern is small enough and there's enough of it, then it does create like a visual texture. So pretty neat. All these are done by just simply pressing things into the clay. And then we have your serrated rib tool. So again, it's the metal rib tool that's a little pokey. They're all a little on the sharp side, but this one has these little points. So how can you create a texture with this? This one's pretty obvious. You can literally just kind of brush it around to create something like just a general roughed up texture. Now you can do a lot of variations with this too. For example, you can kind of create, let me get my, there we go, kind of a pattern going. Or you could even keep them all in the same direction to imply more of like a fur type example. So there's a lot you can do with the serrated rib tool as far as texture goes. So that covers some small objects you can press into your clay to create a texture. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some other things that you can press into the clay to also get a texture. Let me set up and I'll be right back.